Blend Radio's California Employment Law podcast featuring San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. So welcome, everyone. Today we have a special guest joining Ward, and her name is Bernadette Jones. She is the CEO and co-founder of Visionova HR. She's based in the Bay Area. Now, as you know, Ward Heinrichs, California employment attorney, is based in San Diego. So we got both parts of the state covered today. And we're going to talk about actual employment law versus HR, especially for small businesses, because sometimes you may think it's a leadership situation, but it needs to be a legal situation and vice versa. And I don't know, Ward, how many times on the show I'll say, well, do you go do this and that, Ward? And you'll go, no, Lisa, that's HR. Right?
Yeah, there's the jobs are pretty distinct. I mean, obviously there's some overlap, but I'm usually brought in after a problem has gotten to a level where, boy, this is serious now. I do, of course, give advice earlier on. It's usually, we said that this is more about, how can a manager figure out the difference between counseling and when they need to bring heavier guns in. So I don't deal with managers very often. I usually deal with the owner or an executive or something like that. But I will give advice along the same lines, though, to them and say, hey, you've got this problem. Here's what I think you should do. Let's avoid a bigger problem.
Okay. And that's why he has a podcast. That's right. So go to bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com. So Bernadette, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I am great. Thank you.
I want everyone to know your website too, visionnovahr.com. Both of Ward and Bernadette are very active on LinkedIn, and they're kicking my butt out there, making me do more and LinkedIn. But Bernadette, give us a little background of your company. And I love the name too.
So Visionova HR, we are an HR firm, of course. We support small to medium-sized businesses that don't have their own in-house HR department. So typically I'm working with owners, partners, C-suite, and then leaderships of teams. And they don't have an HR department. They've inherited the HR function, actually. So they're doing that with their every other duty that they have. So every other function, the owners is HR. So it's very difficult for them to manage all of that. And most people didn't sign up to be HR. A lot of times we inherit HR. That wasn't the intent, but it's like, okay, you're good with people, so you're HR. So that's kind of the teams that we work with. I've been in HR for over 20 years. I won't say how much over, but over 20 years. Have worked with SHRM on a number of levels, national speaking events for SHRM. And we've been supporting, the majority of our clients are nonprofits. So about 75% nonprofit and the other for-profit. And we'd like to have more for-profit, but that is the majority of our clients. We really focus on mission-driven organizations. So our best clients are folks that don't want us just to keep them from getting sued. They want to support their people and not get sued at the same time. It's not okay, you come in and cover our butts and then we're good to go. So that's not our ideal client. We want those clients out there that are really interested in supporting their people and not getting sued as a result. So,
well, supporting the people means that your clients are doing better and happier. That's what we've always seen, is that communication. Because I know Ward on the show every month is talking about new laws, be sure of what you're doing on minimum wage and understanding DEI and or no DEI, all of those kinds of things. How much of what you do is really about making sure do the right things, like you're saying, the benefits and things like minimum wage, and then going how communication is run throughout a company or a nonprofit where there, don't say this, do say that, how to communicate, those kinds of things, because it's really about culture. And I know that I was reading your website, it seems to be culture is really a big deal. And Ward, we've touched on that quite a bit about how to behave at work.
Yes, that's interesting.
Well, Bernadette, I thought maybe you should tell people what SHRM means, because you mentioned it.
Yes. So SHRM is the Society for Human Resource Management, and it is the largest and oldest association of human resource professionals. And so you get certification through SHRM, lots of training. There are global, hundreds of thousands of members. They have local and national conventions throughout the year, conferences that keep our professionals and leaders in general informed. So there are a lot that attend. There are business owners and C-suite executives that attend to and belong to SHRM. So that's kind of one of the main sources for professional HR consultants and professionals.
Okay. And so when you go into a company, do you say, hey, you may want to join this a little bit to get some background and know what's going on, that kind of thing with having these extra outlets?
Typically not,
Okay.
the membership, typically not. Larger enterprise organizations will be members and they'll have all their HR people members. But
Okay.
the smaller organizations, typically they don't join SHRM, but I do come in and help them understand what the legal ramifications are, keep them updated on all the new laws. I partner with employment law attorneys, so whenever there's a legal issue that I refer out and say, okay, this is not in my purview. We really need to bring in legal counsel, and then vice versa. So it's kind of it's a really good relationship between HR and employment law attorneys.
Okay, so everyone, Bernadette may say, call Ward on this one, but here, let's not let it get to that. Ward is the
Exactly.
cleanup crew here. It's like,
Right.
we're not going to let this, you try to, solve things. How do you find in your work, Bernadette, that you may be, working with a company or a nonprofit and say, whoa, you may think this is the correct way to communicate a situation, or you may have a situation you think is easy to just solve flippantly. And I mean, that could be anything from, payment to wording, how you communicate, and go, whoa, you as leaders may be stepping your toes into what could become a legal situation.
Exactly. Constantly. That's one of the things we really focus on is, first off, building a culture, right? Where everybody can show up and do their best work. It's only going to improve the organization and employees at the same time. And that huge part of that is communication, understanding how to communicate your rights as an organization and an employee's rights. So it's rights and responsibilities, both for employers and employees. And sometimes employers forget that, and sometimes employees forget that. It's not just protecting employees. That's huge, but the organization side has to be there in order for you to have employees in the first place. So it is it's a combination, and culture helps really focus in on what we need to do to support organization and employees at the same time. And a big part of that is compliance and legal. That's that's the bottom line is employee.
Well, I think HR representatives are so important because I don't know how they do it, because they have to be Switzerland in a workplace culture, right? And maybe have to sometimes tell leadership, hey, like, yo, don't do that. Ward will be knocking on your door just now. And sometimes that's hard. And then they cannot be friends. You're not allowed to be friends with anybody, basically, as a HR. And so what happens when you don't have HR? That could be kind of a messy situation, right? Because leadership may do something way off the rails, and then employees don't really have a place to go to say, hey.
Exactly.
So that's where you come in. But what if they don't? Then Ward, that could get bad with discrimination, harassment, things like that, right? Ward, do you see mostly that come in if they don't have HR?
There are problems if they don't have HR, or at least some policies in place that often HR will put into place that will keep the company out of trouble if they're following those policies. And that's what I see mostly as, most companies have, even the small ones, have policies, have a handbook, but you got to follow it.
Right. I love that and it has to be the handbook that's for your organization, because so many small employers will go get a template off the internet, or they'll get a handbook from another business owner they know that has absolutely nothing to do with their organization. You have 10 employees, that employer has 50. And so now you have a handbook that says you provide FMLA when that's something that you don't have to provide, and it's going to get you in trouble because you're too small to support all that. So that's part of it. I run into all the time, or the handbook was done in 2007. And it's so many laws that have changed since then. And if you're following that handbook, you are out of compliance. And that's going to be can be a huge problem. So,
Especially if someone's upset in the employee rankings and they figure it out.
yes, and they figure it out. They
Mm.
they figure it out. It's amazing how fast they know what their rights and responsibilities are. And if you don't have a culture that's supportive, they're going to use that against the organization. You know,
And now with social media, everyone's got a voice and it could get nasty. Ward, have you seen any of that where employees start to retaliate, like, and will do things that
sure.
yes.
Yeah, there are social media platforms where employees will go and say, you know, this really stinks over here, and that can really fester and create much larger problems down the road.
and it's expensive for an organization to lose employees that are good because it's expensive to get them
Right.
trained. And if
Mhm.
you don't keep care of it, it's like buying a fancy plant. You know, it just like
Mhm.
if you buy a tree and you don't water it, it's going to die. You've lost all that you went into to get that tree. You know what I mean? You need to
Right.
support it. So with that balance, what's happening in AI on this, Bernadette? I should never said that term. Her
Uh-oh.
face.
Wow.
I got the yeah, that is
Yeah.
that messing up handbooks.
Well,
Oh,
I wouldn't say it's messing up handbooks. I think where I'm seeing the bigger problem is in shadow AI, where employees bring their own tools to work and the leaders, the company, they don't know they're using these AI tools. They might be free platforms that they're using. Where's that information coming from? And what are you uploading? So I had one client who, this was a partner, who uploaded their financial data to chat to get some reports. It's out there. You can't get that back, but uploaded all their financial data. And so if you don't have an AI policy and governance and let people know what you expect, what tools are approved, and that's a new policy you need to have in your handbook, but it can't just be blanket, don't use AI because they're going to use it. So now you have to really do your research and say, this is what we sanction and what we want you to use, but don't bring in these free models or other models that are not have absolutely no security. And then information is uploaded that you can't control, proprietary information, personal identification, all those things end up on chat. So, or some other platform, but
and the browsers are actually getting it.
yes, exactly. So that has to be really thought out. I'm doing a presentation at SHRM Northern California's annual conference in October, specifically on this, because HR is really in the seat where they need to be. It should not be an IT decision. It should be HR, IT, all the stakeholders, but HR, because that should be a policy for governance of the organization, then maybe down to departments. But that is a big problem. It's only going to get bigger.
And Ward, you did a segment on this, an episode on this about like watch what you're doing with AI and the hiring process because this can
Yes.
become
Oh, yeah.
discrimination, right, Ward?
Certainly. I think the title of the article was Garbage In, Garbage Out.
Yes.
And certainly, if you load the platform with garbage, you're going to get garbage out. And that's really what that's about. You can end up having discrimination, harassment, other things because the platform isn't set up properly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's not AI's fault. Don't blame Claude.
No, I mean, it's a robot, right? So I'm not going to blame a robot, but yeah, the people need to be in charge of it, be aware of it, and be careful with it.
So that's where you say the IT department and HR need to be hand in hand because an IT person is just going to do the geek stuff, which
Right.
I bow down to big time. But the HR has to go, no, we can't do this legally, or this is who because the hiring process that can get tricky.
Yes, hiring process, performance and
Oh,
discipline.
yeah.
If people are using AI to do performance reviews, then bias comes up in those performance reviews. Wherever you're using that, even in like your customer service, the bias and incorrect information. If you're not using AI that has the structure in it where here are the resources I want you to go to, right? Your AI model is set up so you have assigned resources. For instance, for our organization, we use the agencies, California State, IRS, SHRM, Cal Chamber, different resources. We don't just say go search the internet and come back with, all this information that may or may not be correct. So you have to start off with the correct resources, depending on what business you're in and what you're doing. There's so many different AI resources. You need to make sure that you pick the right one and that you're monitoring what's happening, especially in HR. You need an audit trail for the AI decisions that you make. And more laws, as I know Ward knows, are coming out as we speak around how to handle AI in recruiting and performance and all of those decision making.
Well, and it's also scary because, I mean, even as an attorney, Ward, you using AI, you have to be careful because some attorneys have got themselves into hot water
yeah.
even.
Yeah. I was going to mention that there are a couple of problems. One is client confidentiality. If you just upload it to a general platform, then confidential information can be out there in the AI universe, and you don't want that. And of course, making sure, again, that you use the AI properly and put some guardrails on it so that you're not using a tool that can be very effective ineffectively and maybe violating the law.
Right.
Well, the other thing too is it's not always correct. So do employees, Ward, have you
No.
seen anything where employees and employers, I'm going to ask you the same thing, Bernadette, are using AI to, look up laws and maybe getting it a little wrong? Because like I would never have known, even if I used AI, right? That, hey, some of like minimum wage is a great example. Minimum wage in San Diego City is different than California and different in Julian up in the mountains where you get apple pie. And it's the same county. So AI could miss that if you didn't know to input it. So you need to know as a user exactly what you want. But you know what I mean? Are you seeing any of those cases or heard any of those, Ward?
Well, maybe not a specific case like that, but there certainly are problems. Again, I mean, I guess I'm repeating myself, but there certainly are problems with using AI just improperly. And again, the guardrails are so important. I mean, we mentioned before, attorneys having issues with it and hallucinations on AI. So you look up something and you go, oh, write this brief for me. It writes a brief, and then the cases cited aren't there. They don't exist. And so that can happen. It can happen not just with attorneys, but with people who are using it for other reasons.
Well, it's kind of looking at it as a doctor is what my point is. Like if you go in for health advice on AI and now like Copilot has a health one and everything, and all the doctors I'm saying are like, dude, whoa, slow down. You can get some information,
No,
but you are not
absolutely.
the person to diagnose, and neither is AI. And they do warn you on AI too. It's like, I got a headache. Well, what did you do today? It's not a doctor. And so that's what I'm trying to say. AI is not a lawyer,
No, it's not. I use it a lot for research. I really
Sure.
like it, but I do have a background in it. I kind of go, wait a second, that one isn't quite right. Let me look at the source. And so then I'll look at the source and go, it's just not getting this subtly right. I mean, and it happens a lot. And so you really got to go to the sources. You got to be able to recognize it. Obviously, if you're a doctor or a lawyer, you have a little advantage over the general population of knowing, hey, that doesn't sound quite right. I really need to look further into that. And sometimes it does a great job in summarizing and getting you into the place you want to go anyway. But the experience matters so much when you're doing that kind of thing. It really does, because you will get it wrong without that experience. I see it all the time.
Right.
And that's what I'm wondering, Bernadette, on the employee level, are employees, if they're getting restless and not happy in their work situation, are they going to AI for help, do you think?
Yes, they are. And yes, definitely. And, I have clients and they say, oh, our people don't use AI. I'm like, yes, they do. You just don't know it. And so you've got to be proactive and give tools that you sanction with the best resources that are out there and still help people to understand you have to check that. like I've had so many times, like Ward mentioned, there's a case. That case doesn't exist. It's incorrectly applied. And so you have to have a level of knowledge in the first place to know what information to give it to make sure it's right, but then audit the answers that you get. So that's a big thing. And AI has increased. One of the things that I had been seeing even before COVID with small businesses is they have one employee who has the keys to the kingdom. They know the passwords, they have QuickBooks, they have email, G Suite, all of that access in one person. That relationship sours, someone quits, and they left and they have everything. And it's like the company is kind of held hostage. It's like, well, I can't fire the person because they have all this information and I need to get that information first. And so now with AI, it's even worse. So
and social media.
yeah, and social media it's
Ooh,
even worse.
keys to the social media kingdom could be dangerous.
Yes, yes. And so having those redundancies and backups so you're not dependent on one person. I have gotten calls so many times. I need to, I'm thinking about terminating this person, but I'm afraid. And should I terminate? And they've got all this information, so, and that's been a problem for the last multiple years. I've been working and helping clients with. And of course, you got to bring in a whole team sometimes. That's legal, that's IT, that's everybody, because they've got it and they're gone. Or you have to terminate them, but they have everything. Well, how do I get that back or how do I get access before I terminate? I've had clients lose access to bank accounts, folks that have set up post office boxes separate that the company doesn't know about.
Man.
And they're getting checks there. And oh my goodness. So just making sure as a small business that you have those redundancies. You're not dependent on that one person that worked for you for 15 years. That's great. And it's all good until it's not. Right. And so that's
and it can just take one thing to break loyalty or trust that wasn't meant to, and boom, you're in big doo-doo.
Yeah. And so now with AI, it's even more scary.
Yeah, because that was always a problem. Maybe an employee has a certain expertise and a certain access to information, and they're the only one that really has it and knows it. So that's always been a problem. But with AI, it's multiplied. It's just the risk is greater.
Yes.
Do you see anything, either of you, in communications, people using AI in emails, in communication, in within a company and even with clients that may be wrong, like, and not, it's not human anymore. Everyone's using email that is generated by AI, and it's like, okay, are we ever going to actually talk to each other anymore? Can that be, I mean, Bernadette, can that be something that's detrimental in communication?
Oh, definitely, definitely. And AI, like I say, it is a great tool. It can help you create emails quickly, but you still want to look at that email, read it, and make those changes. So sometimes, they'll use the tool and it's like, as soon as you open it up, it's like, okay, that's AI. It's not really addressing the specifics. It's not worded. You can read AI speak and identify it really quickly. So there needs to be some care when you're using those tools, because that can be offensive to clients, to customers, or you're just using very generic language that doesn't feel like you're really engaged with your clients or your customers. So definitely that's something that, as a company, you really want to make sure that you have those guidelines set up. So I'm not just like,
we can always go get AI humanizers. So you can write an AI and then have AI humanize your emails and your reports. I mean, that's where we're going now.
It is. It is.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
De-robot it. De-robot.
Yes, you got a robot to de-robot. I mean, it's just, it's a whole new world. But what are some of the cases that you've seen where this has now got to be where employers are making a mistake in regards to whether it's communication or handling situations? What are some of the typical cases where this does need to be more of a legal, when people do need to get legal counsel? What are some examples?
Well, here's an example I had a few weeks ago. I had a CEO call me and she says, Bernadette, I need help. I have a problem employee, and she's talking about workplace, hostile work environment. I think she's going to sue me, right? So immediately I'm thinking, okay, this is going to be legal. And so then I started to ask some questions. I talked to the director of administration and another director, the employees, and then I found out, which is a lot of times, it really wasn't a people problem. It was a leadership problem. This employee had taken on a task voluntarily a few years ago when they lost the outside vendor. She took on the task. New administrator, new supervisor, nobody knew the task history. So she's doing this. Her job description hasn't been changed. It hasn't been updated. She's doing it, but everybody now thinks that's your role, and you're not finishing this job. You're not finishing the task. So it turns out it was an unacknowledged process, and it was because of communication. Nobody knew. The new people who came in had no clue that this was not part of her job in the first place. So this was actually a good employee who had gotten to the point where she felt like she was being harassed because people were saying, you're not doing this. It's not my job, right? And so what ended up happening is we learned that, we had that conversation, and so the problem employee and the potential lawsuit disappeared. And that was a perfect example of communication. You guys aren't communicating. It's the process. It's a broken process. It's not a problem employee. But then the opposite happens where it really is a problem employee. And they're making claims, where they realize, okay, I'm going to have to deal with something now. So now it's claim, this is hostile work environment. I need a leave accommodation because they're anticipating that there's action about to be taken, and you need to bring in legal because now they've raised the claim. I'm being harassed. It's a hostile work environment, and at that point, you may need to do an investigation and find out, what is legitimate, what's not. And, oftentimes I will refer some of those type cases to attorneys because, you want to make sure you get that right and you're not making a bigger problem.
Ooh, yeah. How does that happen? Like you go in and there is, when it becomes hostile and now investigations have to be done without because it's kind of like walking on eggshells, right? How do you do it so like the whole thing doesn't go haywire and, because when people because there's emotions that happen too, especially if there is a true harassment case, especially if it's an employee and maybe upper management or even the owner doing the harassment, right? That could get that could be, I mean, and do all clients tell the truth? I should never have asked that question. I interviewed a pretty well-known criminal attorney, and he was a state attorney. And he said the first thing he learned when he first started practicing law, he couldn't believe his client lied to him. Because, that was his big learning curve. I mean, it's really hard if it's a leader who maybe did do something. And then someone starts to make a claim, and then people go, oh, no. I mean, harassment claims, a lot of times people go, oh, yeah, they're just playing the Me Too movement card and just trying to jump in on that. And it happens in the celebrity world, but can happen in a company. Meantime, it could be true. So it's kind of, how many eggshells are there? Because it's eggshells with the actual, whoever did it or supposedly did it, allegedly, and then the actual person saying this happened.
Yeah. There are different levels of this problem, and normally I have a good enough relationship with my clients that I can say, hey, let's talk about this a little bit. Let's talk it out. Let me kind of see what's going on over here. And even in that initial conversation, you start narrowing down the issues, and then you come up with a game plan. Now, what kind of investigation do we need? Do we need to bring in a third party? Sometimes you do. Is it that serious, or can we just kind of go backdoor and kind of figure things out? And the other part of that is communication with the employee. If it's totally broke down, that's a whole bigger problem than if you've just got an issue that you can address if you can just sit down and get it out in the open. And so my initial conversation normally is, I hear what you're saying. Let me ask you a few questions about the situation so I can understand it better, and hopefully they're trusting me and I can get to the truth. And like you said, I don't like to use the word lie, but we see things from our own perspective so often, and you only have you don't have the whole story yet. And that's what I try to get to when I'm called in. Let's see if we can see the whole story. And then let me talk about the risk based on the whole story to you, my client, and that now we can address this problem. So that's how I approach it. But you're right. If there is a manager or an executive who has a particular problem that is trickier, you're less likely to get to the truth early on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tell my clients all the time, I try to help them to appreciate, is that having those conversations and communicating before a problem gets blown out of proportion will reduce the number of those types of claims, discrimination, harassment, hostile work environment. It'll reduce it, because what happens is with smaller organizations, oftentimes they avoid issues, right? There's a problem, something happened, maybe performance isn't great, and I kind of avoid it and think it's going to correct itself. It is never going to correct itself. And then what happens is, okay, so now it hasn't corrected itself. I really haven't had great conversations, but now I'm going to discipline or I'm going to terminate. And the employee hasn't had that conversation. They have no clue. And so I'm going to base that on my lived experience. I'm not going to say, well, you have poor performance. The supervisor tells me that, but you never told me that. I don't believe that. I'm going to base it on my lived experience. That means I'm going to say, okay, this is happening because I'm Black, because I'm a woman, because I'm over 40 and everybody's young. I have all this lived experience. That's the only thing I can use because you didn't have a conversation with me. And so then we get to, it's discrimination, it's harassment, it's all these things, because it goes back to leadership not having conversations and avoiding issues as they come up. So just having a conversation, what's working well, what needs improvement, how can I support you on a regular basis? You flesh out those conversations. And so when you do have to give feedback for improvement, I can hear it because I know you're working in my best interest. You ask me what's working where do I need support? So when you tell me I'm doing something or my performance isn't where it needs to be, it's easier to hear that. Otherwise, it's like that came from out of the blue. I don't believe what you just said because I've never heard that. That's foreign, right? And so we have our own perspective. It's what have we experienced, and I'm going to base it on that. That's the only thing I can use, right? Because I have no clue what you're saying, and I don't agree with that. So having those conversations and giving feedback on the regular, feedback people can actually hear, then it's easier when you have issues to deal with those issues.
So agree. That's with everything. I mean, it's like we're in the age of people gaslighting each other, not just in dating, but in work situations, even between, company, like clients even, that's not a good thing because people sit with wondering, and then if it's sitting there, it starts to boil up. If I don't know the answer, oh boy, it starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then you have an emotional explosion somewhere if people don't talk it out. So that culture is so important. Ward, have you seen do you have to like deal that with your clients and go into what are you setting up as a culture? Do you recommend go get HR on your side with,
And that's really not my job. I don't try to create
See, here
culture.
we go.
It's not. That's HR, and I refer to consultants all the time on that type of thing. And I usually start with, you don't want to pay me to do that.
Yes.
It's going to be really expensive. Get someone with HR. Number one, they do this all the time. And number two, they're going to do it less expensively than I would. My billable hours will rack up pretty quickly, and no one's going to be happy. So I want to make you happy. Go see Bernadette. She does this kind of stuff, and she does it well.
Now, do you think most lawsuits that come up from employees suing the employer come from not having HR there, and HR, like, you know what I mean? Where do you
it can.
What busts the line on this? Yeah, what?
Well, really what I see is usually employers can do things and not follow their policies and not follow the law as long as everyone's kind of happy and it's working. But when someone gets unhappy, then they go, hey, you violated this law for the last 3 years, and I've got a wage an hour, and I got a discrimination. And that's the biggest problem I see is try the one to take away from this, at least from my perspective, is following your policies is an amazingly good tool. Even if everything's great right now, it just takes one unhappy employee, one employee you terminated without really having that conversation that Bernadette was talking about, and all of a sudden the lid's off, and this stuff you've been doing illegally for a long time, even though everyone was happy, is going to bite you.
Yeah, totally agree. That is so true. It's just yeah.
What about when there is someone new that comes into a company and completely disrupts and maybe goes into management? Yep, I hit the button. Totally disrupts what's going on with maybe a team that has been together for years, and it's kind of unfair. Maybe it's a new person, and then they're like, oh, we don't want to accept the new person because we've been doing it this way forever. And there's like, and maybe the new person is great. Maybe they're like, no, you're going to all do it my way or the highway kind of thing. So that's a very dicey thing, isn't it, for company culture?
It is. And I see it the opposite way, is that more often than not, what I see, it's the person that's been there forever and a day that is the issue. And they are causing the concern, and it's been avoided because they're really good at their job, right? They do a great job. And so we don't want to rock the boat, but they might be a horrible person to work with, but they get their job done, but nobody likes them. They want to avoid them, and they cause all this turmoil, and it's overlooked, right? But this new person that comes in says, you know what? I don't have to put up with that. Everybody else is kind of, they kind of are going with the whole program there and dealing with Bernadette. She's a real problem. Everybody deals with Bernadette, but a new person comes in and they don't want to deal with Bernadette. And that kind of upsets the status quo. And now either management has to deal with Bernadette, or if you're going to focus on that new employee, it's going to be an issue because that employee is going to see this is not fair. It's not right. It's favoritism. It's discrimination. It's everything under the sun. So because, small employers a lot of times don't have that HR department, and they don't have time to deal with all these issues. People are complaining about Bernadette, but she's good at her job, and they kind of ignore it. And it goes on for years until you get one person that says, I can't take this anymore, or a new person that comes in. So I see it more that way. Typically, new person coming in, they don't have enough clout to cause all those problems. And, they come in, it's easier to get rid of them if that's the kind of person they are. They're new, it's easier. But when you have someone that's been there a long time, that's when I see the bigger problem.
Yeah.
That's
And
a
that
good
can
point.
I mean, then that could end up in a lawsuit if your policies aren't in check, right? That's what happens, Ward.
Yeah, and it's so funny that she mentioned that. I had someone call me about that. I do most of my work with employers, but I still take employee cases from time to time. And I had someone call me, a referral from a friend, and so I spoke to him about it. And that was exactly what was going on. The longtime employee, everyone did not like, but no one called her out. The bosses never called her out, and she's still doing and she's just rude, and she's causing huge problems. And really, I think Bernadette hit it on the head. It's been ignored. And you really should try to take care of those things. And I know we're all people, we're busy. It's just, but those things, they fester and they're going to bite you. They're just going to come back and get you eventually. And so, again, a good takeaway point is take care of it as soon as you possibly can.
Right.
Now, the other thing that's related to that I see is cliques of people who have been there a while. And, they're really, especially newbies who come in, they're really hard on. And so it's related. It's the same kind of thing. But again, if management can step in and take care of that early on, you're just way better off.
Can it turn into, if management turns around and says, okay, we're going to get rid of the cranky person, and you don't really have any line to do that other than you're cranky and annoying everybody, you're the bad apple, as people say. Can that be a drama? I mean, can an employer just go, We don't like you. Bye.
Well, I know Ward would say we're an at-will, state in California,
That's
but
what I was thinking.
we're at will, but you better be able to prove that you didn't do it for an illegal reason, even though you're at will. So that's why you need to be in the habit of handling things, documenting conversations that you have with people. Because in California, if you just fire somebody out, we don't, nobody's going to believe it, that it was just an at-will termination. That's what's difficult
What do you
because
mean about an at-will termination?
so you
I've
don't
never
have,
had to fire anybody, so I don't know.
yeah,
And I don't ever want to. I'd suck at it. I'd be
yeah,
like, do you want to go have a cocktail? And I've got something bad to tell you next. Have a
yes.
drink first. I see I'm not good at this.
Well,
I'll sit in the podcast department.
for my HR simple explanation, and I know Ward will have the better explanation, but it is, I can fire you for whatever reason and you can quit for whatever reason, as long as it's not an illegal reason that I terminate you. That's
As
kind of
long
my,
as it's not against public policy is what I say. And then I define public policy. So I get into the weeds a little bit on it, but she's right. I mean, it's really that simple.
Oh, so free
There's
at
so
will is
many,
will, yeah.
it's an at-will state. It's a powerful tool for employers, but there are so many exceptions, public policy violations that you still have to be careful.
yeah. And go back to that interpretation from my lived experience. If you just fire me and don't give me I don't have a reason. You never said I did anything wrong. And you're saying, oh, I'm just going to fire you because, we're firing people. We're firing you. All my stories are going to click up in my head from past experience, other people's experience. I'm going to say, that's not why they're firing me. No, they're firing me because I'm the oldest person in that department. That's why I'm being fired.
And here it starts.
Right. And so then now you have to prove that's not why you did it. You don't have anything documented. It can go either way.
And maybe they did know
Good point.
something dirty about the dirty leader or something, and then it's like, I'm going to use this. I mean,
Exactly.
is there like, I'm not using the word blackmail, but are there blackmailish kind of things that can happen in a company? Like, an employee may see something that someone did, and then maybe even too scared to say, like maybe someone's on the take, right? You could be working I know Ward does a lot of work with restaurants, and I know we got cameras now, and hey, we've probably got AI testing how much, you do in a till or whatever now. But, an employee's like, once in a while put a $5 note in their bag or whatever at the cash register, and one person knows they do it, doesn't say anything because they're scared, because maybe that person who's done it has been doing it for years. That's kind of just left alone. But there's that kind of tension of like, I know what you're doing, and so don't mess with me. But eventually that could be a really big bad situation, right? Of somebody not telling and kind of holding it as a way of controlling the other person.
Right.
You know?
When I mentioned about employees that have the keys to the kingdom, I've seen more of it where, because I have all the passwords, I have access to everything, I feel a little more entitled.
Some employees feel like they own the place.
Yes, because they have everything and they know you're not going to get rid of it. And so they may act out or whatever. And I had a client that was in this exact situation, and it's like, okay, you got to, you do an offer and compromise, we'll bring in an attorney, but you got to get rid of her because it's going to come back and bite you. She was just not good, but she had everything. She had inherited this employee. She had access to everything. And she was so afraid that if I fire her, I don't have all the information she has. And she knew that. And so we finally moved forward. It was one thing she could not ignore. We brought an attorney in. They negotiated an offer separation agreement with release of claims. So I'm saying she couldn't sue. But what she did is afterwards, she sent an anonymous letter and made all these accusations. You can't prove she did it, but it was her because she had all that information. And she sent an anonymous letter accusing the general manager of fraud. That blew up into a huge investigation. It was just a mess.
Wow.
It was a real mess. So it wasn't blackmail, but kind of sort of, because she knew what she was.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, yeah, and I've seen employees, oh my gosh, even I was in the grocery store yesterday, I could not believe my ears. I'm like going down an aisle looking for pizza. Come on now, it's Sunday. And there were two employees and they were restocking the store, trashing the company and not using the most polite language that people would want to hear with kids nearby. And I looked at them like my first thing was like, I would fire you on the spot just in front of other employees and our clients. You do not sit and trash that. And you see that. And it's really more younger people, not trashing younger people who have not had that life experience you're talking about, that have not really been in the workforce long and just feel like they can mouth off in front of customers about things. And I've seen exactly that kind of person you were talking about, who had the keys to the kingdom, who really has a mouth and will tell clients, if it, this place wouldn't run if it wasn't for me, kind of thing. And I always go, this is not good. And I will not want to do business with a company that has that situation. Yes. Because it's a really icky, it's icky. Like I wouldn't even want them as a client, kind of thing, and I don't want to give them my money either when you see that kind of stuff. But it happens all over. Ward, is that something you could really fire someone on? Like what I was saying.
As you're spinning that out, I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking, you're allowed to talk. I mean, both federal and state law says you're allowed to talk about the workplace conditions. And you're right. There is a point at which maybe that crosses the line, and you go, "Hey, this is more like defamation than it is about talking about workplace conditions." But that can be tricky.
They were trashing
honestly.
A manager and swearing at the manager.
Well,
about the manager.
All right, that's pretty extreme. But there are protections in place that might end up biting the employer if they act too quickly under a situation not quite as bad as that. If they're swearing and stuff, that's one thing probably. But still, I'd take a look at it and say, well, what were they saying? Where is this coming from? I'd want to know some more about the situation other than that they just swore.
I can't get into it because it's just bleep, 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 bleep. I mean, it was pretty bad.
Well, no, that sounds really bad. And I may just say, you just got to terminate them. But I would probably talk about risk. I would talk about risk. I would say, there are these laws in place so that maybe they can be used. And, if I were looking at this case on the employee side, I wouldn't take it, but gosh, I know some firms that might, and they might file it, and all of a sudden you're in a lawsuit, you don't have the right insurance, and you're going to be paying me a lot of money just to answer the complaint and see if we can get this off your plate. It's expensive. The litigation is expensive. So anyway, doesn't mean, even in the situation that you just spun out, doesn't mean that there isn't risk to the employer still.
Right. Wow. So this is important because entrepreneurship, because of the shift especially of what's happening in AI, entrepreneurship is also skyrocketing in the country. It's actually becoming bigger and bigger, I think. And it's happening globally, and younger people are coming in doing startups, and man, they're smart, man. They're making millions, like, as graduating college, and there they are. And I'm like, we didn't do that, when I was that young, but they're doing it. However, do they have this in their back pocket of knowledge to understand, like, when you start a startup, part of it is how you work with your employees. And also a lot of startups have a global remote workforce. So that's also another thing where they don't get to have, so Zoom is lived on, Google Meetings, all of that. So in closing, with people doing so many startups, you're up in the Bay Area, Bernadette, you got Silicon Valley which is always in a lawsuit. It's always in court. Yes. Any tips from either of you in closing for startups going out there, what they need to do to get started? For their employees?
Yes, they need to set up an HR foundation. They need to think about what kind of culture they want to build in the organization and work on building that culture. They need to get people skills because a lot of the startups, it's technical and that's the focus. The people are an afterthought oftentimes. And so they really need to think about the culture of the organization and how are they going to deal with problems when they come up. They really have to think about those things and creating a culture that's not just focused on technology, right? Because people still have to implement.
Yeah.
those strategies, your business plan. You still are relying on people, even with AI, people are not going away that fast. And you're going to need those people to use their judgment versus just the technical stuff. So I say get your HR foundation set up. What are you required to do under law? And what kind of culture are you trying to build? Make the culture you're building in your organization intentional, not it just happens. Because typically when a culture just happens, it doesn't just happen right. We're all human and we come from all these different backgrounds. So it's not going to be, well, people call, we're like a family, but it's a dysfunctional family. So
I have a HR friend who just did an episode on that with us saying, don't ever call your workplace a family, ever. She's like, that's a no-no, because what kind of family are you?
Yeah,
Yeah,
some families are
it can,
dysfunctional.
it's interesting. So Ward, what are your tips for a startup?
Yeah, for a startup, I think Bernadette really hit it on the head. That's really not my place as much as it is an HR consultant's place. I may just say some general things and I say, well, you need a handbook, you need this, and I know someone who can help you with all that stuff. Again, I usually am taking care of the problems on the back end. That's where I spend most of my time. And so I do try to refer that kind of, but the HR foundation is very important. I will say one caveat, if it's a really small organization, 1, 2, 3, well, one person, it's not that big of a deal, but 2 or 3, I may say, all right, you're going to grow and you got to be ready for that growth. So, you need a few policies in place now for sure, but seriously, you got to do 1 or 2 things in the future. One, call Bernadette, when you get employee 4 or 5, 5 is kind of the magic number, or call me and I'll refer you to Bernadette. Because that's when you're going to need that foundation. And I don't do the foundational stuff. I'm too expensive, and I don't do it as often as she does. She's better at it.
Just listen to Ward's podcast and read his magazine and his articles, because that helps. I think, you really give people like, hey, heads up on, minimum wage, because you know what? Small businesses most of the time are too busy doing their business, and that whole part of it gets forgotten. Because quite frankly, it's a pain in the butt. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to look at taxes. It's the same thing, but then all of a sudden it's coming. And if you don't look at the train coming, you're going to get flattened. And so I think that, it's important to keep up with what you're doing, Ward, because you're a reminder of those things, especially if you do not have an HR team, and Bernadette, what you're doing is fantastic. Being able to help, nonprofits, because again, nonprofits right now, I mean, they're just working night and day, to get things going with what they're trying to do. So I think a lot of times if they're small, like you said, it just takes one incident to disrupt the egg carton, so. But everyone, read Ward's articles, because he will keep you on track in California of what's going on. Everything from discrimination, harassment, Uber drivers, the fast track when it comes to fast food, all of that, and minimum wage and all of that good stuff. And, hospital healthcare minimum wage. Oi, that's a whole other, that's a biggie. But then definitely, Bernadette, you've got the culture going and helping everyone with that. So thank you both. As always, everyone knows Best Employment Attorney San-Diego.com is Ward's website, his podcast, his article, and everything that he does. So when you get in the weeds, call Ward. And then for Bernadette, go over to Visionova HR.com. All the links are in the episode notes. Thank you both. I feel like I need to go get pizza now. I don't know why.
Thank you.
And I do love that name, Visionova.
I know, it's cool.
It's nice.
She's got a supernova going on. Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast with San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Keep up with Ward at bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com or follow him on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also subscribe to Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.